Okay. All right. Thank you for bearing with us.
All right, so the hockey proposal, I hope you all had an opportunity to look through the document that was provided to the school committee. So for some context, the Rockport Manchester Essex Hockey Cooperative Team has been in place since the early 90s. We were one of the first cooperative programs in the state of Massachusetts to exist. We started with football. We were the host school for Rockport, and Rockport was the host school for hockey. Fast forward to today, they have also taken on Ipswich, they've taken on Hamilton Wenham, as numbers have declined in those programs in neighboring towns, to which now we have Rockport, Manchester, Essex, Hamilton Wenham, and Ipswich, all in the Cape and North Shore conglomerate to make up our hockey program. Going into this year, in a review of the program, Rockport will only have 2 participating student athletes in the hockey program. So for the sustainability and viability of the program for them, it didn't make a lot of sense for them to continue as the host school. So in looking at the program with our 10 students that are returning into the program next year, we typically average 12 to 15 every year from Manchester, Essex. So we, in the past few years, have made up the majority of this hockey cooperative program. So essentially what I'm looking to do is keep the hockey program intact as these student athletes have developed relationships with one another, with their coaching staff. They have a program in place, but switching the host and ownership from Rockport to Manchester, Essex, as we are the school and community with the most participating student athletes. So it does make the most sense feasibly for us to be the host school going forward, given that Rockport's participation is declining, and our goal is to keep the team together. So that's a general summary. The actual numbers and breakdowns into the returning rostered student athletes are listed below. That's not including any rising 8th grade student that would be a freshman enrolling in the program. So that number would be, we suspect that number would be higher. This is just the returning student athletes that were rostered last year, with subtracting the seniors that have graduated. So I guess I'll turn this over to you for the conversation about how do we feel as a school committee taking on hockey as our school, Manchester Essex.
So we had communicated ahead that what we're hoping for tonight is just a discussion on the direction we should pursue.
Yeah.
If it seems to the committee like it's viable for us to take it on, at least as a pilot, then we'll go ahead over the summer and put together a more detailed budget plan. Right now, Cammie has worked the numbers to make it basically 100% pay as you go. So there should be no financial obligation to the district. It also includes administrative costs sharing charges to the other. So if you want us to go, we can go, and she can talk it through with all of the participants and get their commitments to it. But if it's dead in the water, we don't want to go too far with the process. So just direction tonight would be.
Yeah.
Do we have the field space or whatever? It's
Yeah, we do. So we would continue to keep the existing ice time that has been dedicated to the Rockport program. I've been told by the rink owner manager that they would just transfer it under our ownership. So it'd just be the Manchester Essex team renting the ice time versus under Rockport.
Yeah, I'm curious to get the numbers to. I'm encouraged by the fact that it's budget neutral.
Yep.
I'm grateful for your time to put it into how these kids continue to be able to play hockey. Although the administrative costs are also going to be shared, but it is more on your plate.
Yeah.
You're also bringing this to us, so you feel you're able to take on extra effort to add to your already very busy.
I'm excited about it. I think it provides more student athletes the opportunity to participate because, I mean, from a Manchester Essex standpoint, and I know a lot of the districts feel the same way. It's like when you participate and the school hosts it, there's more buy-in from the student athletes. And I'm hoping it just continues to bring more people into the hockey program and hopefully retain some student athletes as well that are looking to go elsewhere in private school for hockey.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then I think my question would be if we did decline and we said, oh no, we don't want to take this on, what alternatives would there be? Like, would a different town have to take it on? I mean, we have the most kids, so it does make sense for us to do it, but say, thought exercise wise, like,
Yeah.
we said no, what happens then?
Worst case scenario, if no school is willing to take it on, the hockey program disperses to neighboring towns, to whoever will take us. And given how many student athletes we have, we're not likely to be absorbed by another neighboring community, because the way cooperative programs work, in order to get approval, is you have to be under a certain threshold, and if another neighboring town like Gloucester has enough students to host a program without us, they can't and will take us. Rockport with smaller numbers might be more easily absorbed than our student athletes. So that's my fear in this, is not only are these student athletes losing the bonds and connections they've formed over the course of this cooperative program, but they also might not be able to find a home. So that's worst case scenario. We're hoping we'll avoid worst case scenario, and that's assuming no other school steps up to help host it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Just I'm curious. So it's the boys hockey.
boys hockey.
So is there an opportunity to girls
Yes.
play hockey, but is there another district that hosts a girls property?
So we used to be with Marblehead.
Yeah.
In the last few years, we've transitioned to Gloucester. So they're also playing out of the Talbot rink. Gloucester's the host school, and Rockport is also a participant as a guest at that school. So now they'll all, well, they have been, but they all play out of the same rink.
What are our girls' numbers?
Girls are at 6. And that number is now rising since we've transitioned to Gloucester.
So would we be open to keeping our eye on that number, and if it starts to match the boys? That's possible.
So 2 questions. I think there's a lot of. This makes a lot of sense, but two questions just to kind of determine feasibility, because I hate to take this on and then have it
Yep.
peter out, right?
Yep.
So you said 12 to 15 over the last 5 years. Is that been up and down a little bit, or has it been 15 down to 12? Is it slowly declining, or is that?
No, it's pretty consistent.
pretty consistent?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's pretty consistent.
And so you're confident that that is likely to continue?
Yeah,
in the future?
But that is also why I threw that minimum in there, in case something happens and we're not stuck to hockey. If all of a sudden we end up in a position with lifelong work, we have to. But given the participation that I've seen in Cape Ann youth hockey and conversations with them, are not steady.
So help me understand the cost neutral part of this. I guess I'm trying to figure out why Rockport is doing away with it if there's no cost benefit to them.
Yeah.
And you're saying that essentially it would be the same cost to us and students if we took it on as we have now. Just help me understand. It
Yeah,
doesn't sound
yeah.
like.
It wouldn't be the same cost to students and families. It would be an added cost to students and families. The proposal would be a separate user fee structure for hockey, because hockey is a much more expensive sport. So that would be a conversation we have down the road. But the user fee at Rockport is only $325. So it's hard for them to sustain it at that such a low user fee price. Plus, we'd be looking at administrative cost sharing with other districts, which isn't in place currently for this hockey co-op. And then we would be charging admission as well to all of the hockey events.
So is it possible that those changes that might influence the student numbers?
Potentially, we'd have to survey students and families to see participation before we made any decision on user fee costs and adopting it further.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
That's kind of part of the pilot year.
Not part of the pilot.
So if after the pilot year, well. So we're really, the vote be just like, or not voting on tonight.
Yeah.
We're just committing to a 1 year, to see how it goes.
Yep.
As far as.
Yeah, because my fear would be, we go out with a very high user fee, shared administrative costs. We could sustain it this year because we have upperclassmen who want to continue to play, but we can't keep bringing in the numbers at those rates. And then it shifts as a cost to us. And then we're really voting on adding a sport with $15,000 or $20,000 or more. And that's a different conversation. That's a different conversation.
My take on it is that if it is cost neutral and you recommend this as a good thing for us and our students, I don't see any reason for us to stand away. It's pretty good. They do continue playing with their coaches, with their same teammates, and I love that they, in this setting, are teammates with students who they are rivals with in other settings. I think that's a cool thing for them to experience.
Yeah, it's awesome. And you can see the payout when we play them in other sports because they're all teammates and they're supporting each other, even though they're competing against each other. It's pretty cool.
One other thing, if you wouldn't mind speaking to, and Julie, you may want to jump in on. It's questions that I've asked you in the process is. What does student discipline look like, for a co-op this size when we move into the lead position and not just a participant position?
It's very much in partnership with the neighboring district. So if it's a behavioral concern that's happening throughout the school day, we let them take the ownership and autonomy of that in communication with the coaching staff and myself to see if those issues academically and behavioral will start to affect their hockey participation. We already do that when it comes to attendance and academics. It's just continuing to monitor that in a shared and collaborative way. And then as it relates to participation in hockey, if there's behavioral issues in hockey, they get carded, they get ejected. We handle that within the athletic department in collaboration with the principal. So the student athlete from Hamilton Wenham is DQ'd. We handle it internally within the program, but then also communicate with the principal and dean students at Hamilton Wenham so that there's some administrative oversight over there as well.
So. Sports have been or local sports have been in the news lately.
Yes.
If there were an issue with an MIAA rule. But our students go to 4 different high schools, how
That's the question.
are the consequences rolled out?
So it's exactly as laid out. We are a host of different schools already. We already host Rockport in football. We host Rockport and Gloucester in cross country. So we're very familiar with the process. All of the athletic directors work very collaboratively together when it comes to these issues. So usually what happens is their school administration will find out the chemical health violation, conduct their investigation, and relay the information to us within the athletic department. So they would have the oversight of that student throughout the school day. They would let us know a chemical health violation occurred. They would meet with the student and family with us in conjunction, send out the letter, and then that student would serve it within our program.
And so if students from multiple districts were involved in a single incident, do we feel good about our relationship with the principals, that those principals would then?
Yeah, we've had, for what it's worth, experiences already.
Everyone is being held to the same level of accountability.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we've worked with them on different situations in in our time here together, so we all come together, and we all make decisions together. And it's been a really good working relationship with the teams, with the towns that we have the relationships and the collaboration with.
Yeah, it's a very small Cape County, sure, as I'm sure you all know and are familiar with it. So we all do work very closely together, just in general, so this is anything. We're already working together, we're having the conversations, and the thing with chemical health is that it's an MIAA policy, so it's universal across all of our school districts, so they're already familiar with those policies and the consequences of those policies from their own participation in other sports.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, concerns? What do we just need a straw poll with
Yeah, a sharp poll would be great. And if you guys are in support of us moving forward using more kind of developed plans and outreach to the participating towns, we will go forward with that. Great. If they're not, we can just let them know.
And David, did we hear you say that would include potentially surveying students about the impact of costs?
More so for families, but yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, for participation, like if this is the AFP.
Right. Would it prohibit them?
Yeah.
Great, so just straw poll if you are in support of Cammy further exploring this option. And working towards a pilot here. Yep, awesome.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. I'll see you in August.
Thanks, Kim, appreciate it. All right, handbooks. Handbooks. And.
I told her to take the night off too, so she didn't listen. I've been there.
I was waiting for you to say, no, John, you know, it's the night off. Partners in this.
Yeah. So it's been a long time since we proposed new language in the handbook. And we've got a couple of things that, you've been talking about, I would say over the last like 12 to 24 months. So we're gonna just kind of break each one down for you, so you have an understanding of kind of where it came from and, kind of how we arrived at the language. Some are more complicated than others, so we enlisted some help, of some, professionals in the different fields. So the first one, we titled it hydration, but it really has to do with really caffeinated drinks. So there are a lot of things that are kind of infiltrating themselves into the world of young people. So social media, technology, and lately I would say the last, I've noticed that the last year, but year plus, there's been a massive increase in the marketing of energy to young people. So we have a few situations this year where we had students with energy drinks that come in with like really pretty cans and are very appealing to young people visually. And a lot of the adults in the building didn't know what it was. It just looks like a fruity, drink. But come to find out, they're energy drinks that have between 150 milligrams and 300 milligrams of caffeine. So any of us who grew up in the 80s, you might remember Jolt soda, which every one of our mothers said, don't ever go near that. Jolt soda had 72 milligrams of caffeine. If you fall into Dunkin' Donuts right now, their entire board is all about energy drinks, and they're called, what are they called?
Refreshers.
Yeah,
And
charge or something, or energizer. And it doesn't have the word energy in it. So you look at the marketing and it's very like beachy and, fun and appealing. So anyway, as a small step towards, kind of PR for families, but also preventing kids from bringing those into school. Obviously, if you have, a 10-year-old come into school and they're drinking a 200 milligram little tiny can. I mean, they design the cans to be small so it, the caffeine hits quicker. Just imagine classroom management and how that works. So what we said here is that students may only bring water, milk, or juice to school. Soda, energy drinks, and other beverages are not permitted at school. Students are encouraged to bring a refillable water bottle to fill up the water at bottle stations to stay hydrated throughout the school day. So we kind of combined what we had in there in the past about hydration, and then just added the kind of energy drinks and that sort of thing. Not being
the next two, contagious diseases and head lice. These both came in guidance with our district physician, Dr. Allison St. Marie. So the contagious disease, that most of that replaced language is already in the handbook. The only thing that has changed is in regards to pertussis or whooping cough, with students having to stay home a minimum of 5 days rather than the 24 hours, which is what it said before. So that's the only change there. And then for head lice, one of the fun topics of elementary school. Times have changed since I still remember being in elementary school and having the nurse come into the classroom and pulling you aside with the comb and like combing through hair to check for lice. So guidance around that has changed since my time in elementary school, where sort of that whole class population and like a check of head lice for everyone is no longer, it's not proven to be effective at all. So Dr. St. Marie just updated the guidance to say that population-based screenings have not been found to be effective, but the school nurses are available to check students following treatment at parents' request, and can provide guidance on effective treatments.
I think the other piece in there was head lice was listed as a contagious disease before, and it's not recognized as a contagious disease. So we just took that out and added a new language. And then the last piece is around MCAS. So there's a lot of misinformation out there about MCAS. There are groups that are promoting, I guess you would say, with parents to opt out of MCAS. And there's even, language in terms of letters that parents can send into schools that say, my child will be opting out of MCAS. There is no opt-out provision for MCAS. It gets a little sticky when parents want to have their child not participate in MCAS, which is actually what it is. When a student does not take MCAS, they get a 0, the school gets a 0. It is in the student's record. It does count against the school when in our accountability formula. So when we come and present our data next year, we did have a number of students this year not participate in MCAS at the parent request. So we have a process that we go through in terms of communication with the families, phone calls with the families to try to explain that there is no actual MCAS opt-out provision, and that the student will receive a 0, the school will receive a 0. We've had some luck talking to parents who are like, oh, geez, I didn't even realize. And some, who have said, that's great, but we're not, we still don't want them to take it. So we have them sign a document that says that they acknowledge that they understand that the school will get a 0, their child will get a 0, and they're still choosing to opt out. So we just wanted to put that in the handbook that we send out in the fall, just so parents know ahead of time, because there is a lot of misinformation out there regarding the opting out policy. Lack of better offense.
Roughly what percentage?
So it's interesting. It's a small percentage, but one of the things that I've learned over time is when something happens once like this, then it's a little bit of a domino effect. So an example I can give you that's unrelated but related. In 15 years, or you could say 18 years between my time here and over in Situate, I've never had a parent ask to dismiss their child from school from a field trip offsite. This year there was one. It was kind of a extenuating circumstance, so we kind of made made some provisions so that could happen. And that was 3 weeks ago. I'm up to 6 now. So I think the last 2 years we had maybe 1 or 2 people ask to opt out of MCAS, and this year I forget the number. There was probably about 7 or so requests. I think there were only a handful that kind of went through with it.
Just takes one kid, because everybody knows who's in your class. Everyone knows who should be in the seat next to you. So if your friend isn't there, you can ask your friend or recess where they were, say, defer, you don't mind, whatever.
Because that's my
That's
concern.
what my kids, that literally was my son coming home and saying, Mom, how come you didn't knock me out of the speaker? So this was that they were in Chromebook playing games at the library.
I do think it's really important that families understand the repercussions of not taking this one assessment. When we look at various assessments to measure progress, because this is a very public facing assessment. So when this data is published, it reflects our town and like our school system and the desire for families to want to move here. So I think we just have to really do a better job. And this does that. I think making families go the extra mile and having to sign something that I'm making a decision for my child to get 0 is, so I appreciate that.
Thank you. And we're very small, so a handful of zeros.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just have a couple minor potential items that would just clarify which grade students are taking. But the other thing is the way you talked about receiving a 0 makes it sound like they're getting a 0 on school grades. So I think that might be worth clarifying. But I didn't hear, to follow up on your comment just now, I didn't hear anything in here about opt-out. And it sounds like that is an official, at least the way you're enacting it, an official option for parents.
No, it's non-participation.
But you have a form for them to sign.
It says non-participation.
So that sounds like a viable option.
For them, yeah.
The opt-out and social movement being presented to parents by different organized groups. So they present us with their letter or their verbal declaration that they would like their child not to participate. So after them going through a series of events that John mentioned, the meeting, the discussion, we do ask them to sign a document that says they are opting their child out.
You know, it says they
Not
are not
participating.
participating. Using.
I'm just trying to get away from,
You know, having,
you know. Because
it's a document that we've been through the process and we're aware. So we are now keeping records so that when we go to present our data in the fall, we can have an accounting of the impact of non-participation, because for a lot of
Isn't providing a district form essentially endorsing it? I mean, don't you already have the record by them presenting the formal request? Or the formal notice that they're gonna not participate?
it's
I
not,
think it's
yeah,
safer for us to have a record than not, because memories are short.
So,
And when the
Could you-
child,
just to clarify that, I mean, we went back and forth on this because I hear exactly what you're saying. But then we're kind of in this position of when the parents like, and sometimes it's verbal, sometimes it's not the authenticity. You do not have permission to put my child this test. It just puts us in this very awkward position. So we could go stronger, I guess, and say, well, you're taking them, but then parents will kept their kids home for the duration of the testing and the makeup of that. So we're trying to discourage as best we can. I hear you saying, like, there's a formula.
The paper might be better, because then they're absent. You know what I mean, like to your voice.
so also to give an alternative perspective on the paper trail, while it may seem like we're endorsing it, we're actually record keeping on it, because if and when MCAS record presents itself as evidence for a student not making effective progress later on down the line, we will have an active record with active documentation within the student record that we have met and counseled these parents and they have chosen this path. Then we may or may not have to remediate a parent chosen path. It's very similar to when students are going on extended family excursions that they withdraw from school and then re-enroll in school when they return, so we can have evidence that the parents are making active choices about their education that we will then at some point likely or potentially be responsible for remediating. So I do think it's nice to have an active documentation. Again, one student in a class of 50 is 2 percentage points on our.
when we say that they get a 0, when I'm looking at our MCAS scores, are we averaging in a bunch of zeros?
I agree with Sarah and like to keep, I think what Kate's getting at, like I think it's like a lot of language that strongly encourage you to get your kids to school is, but I think explaining a little more context, like this is a statewide measure. This is a measure, a benchmark for a key benchmark for student achievement to track it over time. You know, like explaining a little bit more of the purpose of the why, because you know, that vote to not have MCAS first graduation requirement is kind of the thing that set the stage for this. So I think that's where this information is coming from. Oh, this isn't required.
And the other side,
Or part of how our public schools have come to function. Now, we might not like that, right? We might not like that, but at the end of the day, you know, we do have, as a district, have a responsibility to make sure that parents are fully informed for like the context and how this is used beyond just graduation requirement. And to explain, you know, to explain that purpose, I guess. So I think it's like, it depends what the form says. So the handbook is a great start. It's also what the form says when they're signing off. It's not just like, popped out. It's very strict language of saying, like, these are the things that you're not gonna have access, that we're not gonna have access to as far as serving your child by opting out of this.
Because, yeah, I just talked about that,
Okay, great.
you know, how we use the data, and we won't have that data for your child.
Yeah.
and,
That's great. And then I guess, I don't want to necessarily go down this rabbit hole, but I'm curious if other districts are experiencing this similar, and so then are we seeing other districts' scores be affected by the 0 as going into the average, and then is that pulling down MCAS scores across state?
I think the reason we got here was we were thinking like, okay, so in the fall, we're gonna come and present our data cleaning. It's last year we had maybe 1 0. This year, if we have 7, next year, if we have 15,
Yeah.
at what point does it not become relevant data to reflect student performance.
The reality is we've had kids doing this. They can sit in a seat, cut a bubble in one question. And the result is the same, right? This is a social message, that parents are trying to send, right? So I think absolutely do everything we can to educate them. But functionally, there is no functional consequence for families,
For an individual, right?
for an individual on this, right? Now, if you're saying, however, Pam, and if you're saying that it's in the language already, that we use, that potentially the data could have personal consequence for showing growth or whatever, that actually is a personal consequence potentially, right? So that might resonate a little bit more.
A few cases,
Yeah, but they don't know that at the time, right? But I'm just, I don't know how far you go down that road about making that claim, so to speak.
I still feel strongly though, like that is true. And as a teacher, I've watched with being very upset with the kid that finishes the test in 2 seconds. However, in my experience, that's few and far between. And that child has that autonomy to make that decision in that seat on that day. I just feel like we need to make sure parents understand and our community, like it's not actually an individual piece in my mind, because the MCAS scores reflect all of us. It's like what progress and growth are our children making across the district, and this is a measure the state uses, and it's one measure, and we do a good job of reporting on other measures. But if as a community, you don't have children in the town, and you have a stake in this because our housing is tied to the performance of our schools. So I just feel like we have to do our due diligence, and this is a way to do that. So it's that this information isn't out there, that at least you've had the conversation and you've invited the parent in to make sure they understand what the implication is to theirs.
There does need
We're
to be
full support.
community bias, yeah.
Yeah, I'm supporting. Obviously.
So it's really outreach, memorialization of the process that took place and part of the record that in fact principal did counsel provide information and the parent made an independent decision. There is no consequence for it, but we don't always want to have to make decisions for a negative instance, but if there is no memorialization of the process the person went through, then it's very easy 3 years down the road to say, principal told me it was fine, it wasn't any big deal. And then there's no evidence of the contrary. So I think it is important that we have some type of a record that we are actively trying to inform parents who are free to make choices of what the implications of those choices are, and the principals to fulfill their responsibility.
Do you think it would be us to do some outreach? And if you're saying this is a problem that's growing, to sort of counter the misinformation, and we need to be upfront about why we have to get some support as we do.
We have in our newsletter.
Yeah, we put it in the
Yeah.
newsletter, when this was kind of unfolding. It's like, hold on a second, because, it's like the word spreads, and so we wanted to get the correct word out there.
And this is a backlash against a larger statewide effort, right? We're not gonna locally change that.
It's a fine line to walk between telling our kids that their worth is not based on a test score,
Right.
and at the same time, you need to try
Push
your
it.
best.
But that's where the parent tested comes into play, right? Because like I don't share MCAS results with my children, and that's my parental decision. But I don't tell them they have a choice either. Like they don't have a choice whether they go to school either. There's when they go to school, this is what they're in the care of the teachers and the administration. So obviously I feel very strongly that we should keep this, and I put this in the
Yeah, and I think if we frame it in newsletters, but I think we also can, when the MCAS scores are presented, and put it, in the newsletter or various channels, like these are MCAS scores of note. We had X number of opt-outs, and this is the.
Not all.
Non-participation. We had X amount of non-participation, and this is the impact that but we wouldn't necessarily know the impact, but like,
Exactly, let's say because that conversation happened more frequently this year, we actually exchanged some conversation and email around, let's keep track of the number of letters
yeah,
so that we can account for it.
I think it's
when we're
important.
presenting.
Yeah.
Because it's not all about the numbers, but it could play a significant role in up or down.
Especially like, as you also, in such a small district.
So are we voting for these or this is just for our? So does it go to this one, school council?
What's funny about the student handbook is it both is and isn't a responsibility of the school to do it. So I think a vote of support would be very helpful. There's nothing in the handbook that really goes beyond student management and building management. Usually what we're looking for at this group is when they propose likely from more from high school level, but any student discipline policies that may be running in conflict with law or larger district policies like the harassment policy or.
I did peruse a bit of the handbook and I was curious if some of the language around transportation and communication, I don't know if PBS also uses pickup control, but you know,
You're-
keep it here.
We can go into
Point
an
of order.
ordinance book.
Yeah.
but-
It needs an overhaul.
Jim,
The handbook needs to, I mean, it's predates us by a lot of years. So this was kind of more of like the pressing, the pressing, not too pressing. the pressing.
There's the license.
Yes, yeah.
might be a good opportunity for the next year when Matt comes on board to relook at the K-8 handbooks together, because I think that was the last big overhaul we did was when Steve Goodidis was here. We were trying to align some of the practices around dismissal, letting kids out for appointments and
Yeah.
things like that. So we were all sitting on the same page. But it could be a good opportunity.
Now, Maria would appreciate it.
Pick up patrol, Sharon.
Yeah.
All right, so, show of support for changes to the elementary handbooks. Everybody shows Christie support.
Was there anything else? That was the first.
All right,
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
thank you both.
we promise to remember this when you bring us the MCAS.
Yeah.
We'll remind you.
All right, district improvement plan.
Hi, Heather.
Hi, everyone. How's it going? Fun night. I'm taking a minute to get my text set up.
Well, I was pulling it up. We tried to make this as streamlined as possible. So the two documents work together. The progress report is more the every deliverable and where we stand. And the slide deck is more of a summary with some highlights and observations. Two things dawned on us. We really just approved this late fall. So some of it we haven't been at very long, but in the same breath, what we're starting to see as we work and reflect and analyze at the end of the year is the deeper we're getting into the strategic plan and these iterations of the district improvement plan, the more we're seeing the overlapping of the work that's represented by those three overlapping gears. Because we were having a hard time reporting on some of the individual pieces without getting into how they connect to others. So we're going to do our best to make it not overly complicated to understand, but try to point out to where we're starting to see the blending or merging of different objectives into one.
Cool. Okay, we go big screen or is the virtual better?
I can go big. Maria, see that? See where it says annotate and we've got those double arrow?
There we go.
On that, I should put it out.
As with everything, we ground our continued work in our district vision, so it's always helpful. It's where we need to be towards on behalf of our student, staff, and community. Pam always likes to bring this back up. Where does this come from?
So for some of you, you're probably sick of seeing this diagram, but just as a reminder for people who may be watching this or listening for the first time, the district improvement plan is fed by three different sources. It's our strategic plan, which provides the construct for it. But we're also responsible to federal and state mandates, and we're trying to be responsive to student data and local needs. So we work those three pieces together to create our 3-year set of improvement goals. And just the district plan is made up of the mission, vision, strategic plan. But basically, it's tiered. So what we set for the 10-year big picture plan then breaks down into 3-year increments, which then provide the construct for the school improvement plan and the educator plans. One thing to keep in mind at the school plan level, they're working within the same they're working within the same framework, but there's always a lane for the individual need of that school. So not everything has to be what the district is working on, especially if something emerges in the student data or at a developmental level that is kind of the moment, and this will needs to be responsive to. So it's a construct that we work toward, and our hope is that the work all funnels down into setting goals in the educator plan, so that what teachers are working on reflective of all of us rowing in the same direction for improvement. This was the rework of our front page of the district improvement plan to try and show what we're starting to see and working on articulating, which is we have 3 priorities, but the 3 priorities work in concert with each other, all to try to provide a better learning environment for kids and promote improved instructional practices and opportunity for students to feel more like they're active parts of their learning and not recipients of knowledge. So we're going to take a stab at showing you what we've been able to accomplish and what we're a little bit behind on as it relates to our goals and objectives for this year.
So strategic initiative 1 is, we use the short language of authentic learning to capture this big idea. In the district improvement plan, there were some components that were listed for the idea of FY26. And this is a attempt at a quick overview of the components that we would say are either complete, as in it's a task that was done, or something that's potentially on track and in progress at the expected pace that we would be looking for. And we're actually going to share, do a little spotlight example of what some of this has looked like in action over the course of this year. One particularly that was identified for the FY26 that is slightly behind, but is still in progress and will be, I would say, on track by the fall, is the action step of the inventory and the development of the matrices. That work is scheduled, and we expect to have that deliverable completed by the fall. So we're able to complete it by this spring, but it's planned for this.
And I think we had a really good conversation around making sense of what that is and who the intended audience is. Because sometimes when we're getting into instructional and curriculum discussions, we're kind of in the weeds and using a lot of the inside baseball language. The matrices or the matrix is kind of an outward facing document that will provide examples to families as to where they can see some hands-on authentic learning in their kids' experience, as opposed to articulating every step of the process that goes into authentic learning. And that's something that we're working on since the fall, right? The fact that there's a whole set of processes and ways of teaching that promote authentic learning are authentic in themselves. And then there's the product that comes off it. And we tend toward talking about products when people should demonstrate where it exists and not so much talking about the process of what goes into it. So we are trying to create some examples of things you can see, but also we're trying through our plan and our report here tonight to start to talk about where you can see all of the steps in the process of getting to that.
And underpinning all of this is this idea. I'm getting this slides cut off.
I can fix that.
Yeah, sorry.
That's
And I'm not going to read it to you, but this is our shared definition of authentic learning. So I think that component of when we're talking about what is authentic learning and where might you see it, a lot of these components are things that when people try to think of examples, they'll often come across as either a product or an experience that's the culminating event experience or thing. But when you really read through it, a lot of it is how are we engaging and learning during the day? So each of the components within there's a lot of rich unpacking that is taking place. So that work is happening with our teachers and with our administrators over the course of the year. And then also then thinking about how do we then communicate what that looks like, feels like to our community, because it's not as simple as just like, this is the authentic learning thing, and then we teach everything out. So trying to continue to have these conversations so that we're calibrated on what does it even look like and sound like and feel like, and then mapping out what the evidence could be as we continue to move forward with this in a transparent way. So wanted to talk through one of the places that we've been attacking authentic learning, which we've been really using a vehicle of curriculum review as a place to lean into this. And so if you go back to the definition, some of the pieces that you're going to see in here to highlight are things like inquiry-based experiences, real-world application, guided by students, background knowledge or experiences, real-world issues, higher-order thinking. So there's some of these components that in and of themselves are requiring us to really deepen our understanding of what does that look like, sound like, feel like. But this is the piece that we want to spotlight as a place that you could see some of this work happening. So some of you have heard me talk a little bit about curriculum review processes before. And so this is sort of a high level snapshot of like, what does that look like for us? So it's an ongoing, and one of the key pieces that I want to share here is the idea that curriculum review does not mean the published textbook or the website. It may include the resources and products we use through the teaching process, but those curriculum materials are just a component. When we say curriculum review, we're talking about the sequence of learning experiences, the pedagogy and the teacher practices that go into teaching that content based on what the research says, the assessments that we use to see our students learning, the curriculum material having, those real world experiences, the opportunity for student choice and voice within those. What is that vertical articulation look like? What does that coherence horizontally across look like, feel like? So we're really being inclusive with that word curriculum, and the driving questions that lead this work are, what do students need to know and be able to do? What does research say about teaching and learning in the discipline? And is the curriculum meeting the needs of all of our learners? And how do we know? So quite clearly from those three, you'll see what we're not just thinking about is like, do we need to buy a new textbook? Honestly, that might be a step, but that is absolutely not. That is a piece of what this work is. This is not all, but here's a few samples that I just thought it would be worth highlighting a few of the steps of where we currently are and what looking ahead looks like for us in a few of these pulled content areas this year and moving forward. History, social science, for example, I had a chance to share a bit about that with you, about the work that's been taking place in that curriculum review process over the last few years. We are moving towards this implementation stage here with the investigating history, which is that curriculum I've shared that has been published in partnership with DESE and local higher education and some other organizations like Primary Source. This is a piece that curriculum tool investigating history is something that we're moving towards implementing across grades 3 through 7. However, it's really that, but also centered around the rich professional development that actually is talking about how do we shift the way we teach history and social science. So what it isn't is memorize these dates and memorize these names and label this map, but it's really around centering inquiry. What are these really interesting, rich questions that we want to ask about it? What do students already know about these components of history or think they know? And how do we build towards understanding using primary source, using artifacts, thinking about ranges of perspectives of moments in time in history and how those cultures and those moments connect and interact with each other. So that is one of those examples of, I can say, we're just investigating history. It sounds like, oh, it's a piece, but it's really a comprehensive component of that work and shift that's taking place, for example, in that. And that work is continuing as we move forward into next year. Science, technology, and engineering, we are at the point that on our curriculum review, and just want to pull back here. What I didn't mention is I sort of see these as like 3 phases. And if I could have, I would have put little arrows on them to sort of think about, we start in that review and analysis, like, where are we? What's going on? What do we know? And what does the field tell us, right? So what are we hearing from our community? What are we hearing from students? What does our data say? What does the research say? What does the framework say? And then we think about identifying what do we need to do and starting to apply the results of the consensus from that analysis. So what's going on? Where do we want to go? How do we get there? And thinking about what do we try, and then applying those recommendations, those steps, potentially field testing, whether it's instructional practices and changes, curriculum materials, shifted courses. And then the implement is when we make that commitment to say we've analyzed, we've tried, we've applied, and now we're saying now we're moving towards an implementation. And that implementation step is sort of where we're saying this is our next step forward, and that in itself takes a few years to do. So, but science, technology, engineering, we're in, you know, depending on the grade band you're in, right, we're in a little bit of a stretch from the identify and apply and into the implement piece, because some of the outcomes of that curriculum review, some of it is the resource itself may not have been a shift, but the instructional practices that have changed, or the actual organization of what's happening during that instruction has changed. For example, you might know that we've used No Atom as a curricular resource in grades 3 through 5 for quite a while. However, what was weak in the No Atom curricular resource was a lot of the organization of the units was not grounded in the idea of using a real world phenomena to connect to the learning students were exploring. So it's missing some of that inquiry cycle that students deserve to have to really engage in their curiosity. So our teachers have spent time this past year using the resources and tools they're familiar with, but reorganizing their units and grounding it in an anchoring phenomena so that they can actually engage in an inquiry cycle. Even though the tool's familiar, they've spent time in professional learning and then collaborative work to remap those curriculum maps so that they're focused on standards, but through this new shift in that learning to shift that instructional practice. I know the question around the mystery science resources, for example. So K through 2 have had access to the digital platform for mystery science before I was here. It was there, but it was sort of more of an opt-in. So they reviewed the different pieces and the tools that were out there and said, this does have the components that we need, but we do need to make a commitment to all do it. And one of the big pieces that we've been studying over the last 2 years is that we don't want to learn about science. We want to do science and engage in it. So what you actually saw in that voucher was the hands-on curriculum resources. So it's not just online platform lessons. The kids are going to get to do this stuff. And that's been happening in pockets and with some appreciation to some of our friendly neighborhood PTOs who have actually supported some of those consumable resources, but it removes that barrier for a teacher or a grade who might then have to collect a bunch of consumable tools for kids to say, that's an expected part of what we do in science course. Now, all across all of our grades, the teachers all together came to consensus and made the commitment, mapped their units, and will now all have access to those consumable resources to do that. So that in itself isn't a new tool adoption, but we're really making that commitment to embed that instructional practice of engaging as a scientist, as an engineer in that learning space. Like I said, we're on a bit of a range on that adoption. Open SciEd is a curricular resource that 6 through 8 did some analysis of the published tools that were out there that have been reviewed, started to narrow it down, identified final 2, and then after some review and conversations with other districts, decided to field test Open SciEd. Actually went to a neighboring district to observe this past year. So that's one of those pieces that there is still in that, you know, trying and applying, but not necessarily towards the implement because they haven't landed, if that's the piece, because they're to do the field testing to get the data to see if it's getting what they want. And then 9 through 12 took a bit of a different shift because it wasn't necessarily for them. Their findings wasn't necessarily that it was a published material, but it was a bit of the, again, unit redesign. So we're launching some of those units with that connection to a real world, no matter what area of science you're in, and doing that redesign around that. How we then engaging in a range of assessment routines to check for learning as we go throughout the process, rather than just singular unit assessment. And additionally, a lot of the feedback that came through that curriculum review process, there's an overwhelming feedback from students that there was components that they felt were missing as resources and access. So that student feedback identified marine sciences clearly as a missing piece, and you all made that support and approval through the program of study. So there's some course development that's happening, both the new course that was identified, but then there's some redesign that's taking place, like for example, within the environmental science programming to make sure that they're connecting it to local connections and building it to community. So some of that is that continued implementation or field testing or evaluating because we're in different stages depending on the grade band hearing. And I'm going too long because I'm excited. So I apologize. I'll be a little more succinct. Mathematics, we just finished this first year of the renew in analysis. So we just have basically spent the year like, where are we? What does our data say? What do our students say? What does our community say? What does the research from the field say? What does our curriculum framework say? And doing that alignment, and we have worked together from pre-K through 12 and have a vision for what does mathematics instruction look like that might feel like based on all those inputs. Now that next step is from where we are based on the data and what the vision is where we want to get to, what are those next steps? So those next steps will likely look like. Some folks will be looking at field testing some potential new curriculum resources and tools in those classrooms. It could most likely also include additional professional development and learning, and may also include some additional analysis to narrow down what those scopes are. So though that level of articulation is still in that year one, we just started that this past fall. Similarly with ELA 6 through 12, just finished that first stage of that review and analysis, and moving towards narrowing down on and this is grade 6 through 12, in instructional practices and some of the identified shifts that we want to see there based on the vision that team set, and moving forward with applying those recommendations last year along with that continued review and data cycle component. So a lot of really great work, and these are just a few samples. So, obviously a lot that we could share, but just places that we're highlighting that the processes themselves, we're starting to look for those components of that authentic learning that we expect to see in our classrooms, driven by training, curricular resources, student assessments, bringing in student voice and feedback as well. Another one of the pieces that, just a quick snapshot, was an action step within our authentic learning, was thinking about training and resources for technology and AI integration was one of the action steps. So this year is just a quick snapshot of one of those steps. We partnered with the RAISE initiative out of MIT, who have partnered with Day of AI and Common Sense Media, had a chance to provide information sessions for our community, multiple teacher training days, and a kickoff keynote with a whole collaborative group that both engage teachers on their own comfort and familiarity with AI, and then level-based elementary versus secondary, because obviously that's going to look a little different. And then we also really thought about that idea of like, what do we need to be literate about as educators and adults in this space, as well as what do we think we need to know, which students need to know as that student pursuing. So here's another one of those quick examples of work towards that strategic initiative one.
So strategic initiative 2, SEL and MTSS, this is the one I think we're a little stalled on at the moment. Not that we are falling behind, but we haven't made the progress that we've wanted to for a couple of different reasons. One is bandwidth. When you look at the list of what we're working on, all the same, it's the same crew of people that work on all of these initiatives. So I think the curriculum piece has really taken center stage and taken a lot of energy. Also, we're not going to lie, the building project has also consumed a lot of energy and filled a lot of holes in the schedule. With that being said, our existing support systems are sound, and they're still serving students effectively. What we haven't yet realized, and we were hoping to be further ahead on this year, was really extending the vertical articulation into the high school, so it's clear what it looks like at that level. So that's work that's going to be continuing. And I think we're going to have a new opportunity with Matt coming on board next year, and Julie now having some time under her belt to start to advance that process. The same with the district-wide framework for SEL and MTSS. I think we're very solid at the elementary. We have made progress at the middle. We're in a funny interim year, so things aren't necessarily going to fully embed. And I think if you've spoken with Matt, you're bringing a wealth of knowledge in this area, and I think will help us to be able to solidify practices, and as the principal, actively maintain it and be partner in it, as we have with the elementary teachers. What we're highlighting on this initiative is an area where we're starting to, or it's feeling like, oh my gosh, we really didn't get to a lot of the things we were talking about. So one of the things we had set, but we found a little bit of a silver lining is what I'm trying to say. So the vision this year was that through our the year, not this past year, the year before, we worked with RBT to kind of reset our focus on evaluation process and walkthrough, and shift from looking at classrooms, and we see a lot of happy kids who are surface engaged, they're compliant, they're engaged, they're doing what they're supposed to, but kind of resetting to look beyond, to look at more of the instructional practices and their impact. So what we had set for ourselves this year was actually to dig in a little bit on some SEL look-fors in the classroom, building on the work of the previous year. What we ended up with were some corrective actions in MLL. So the team went through a series of training sessions with our MLL teacher, and we actually ended up using MLL style look-fors through our walkthroughs. But what we found was, and another pointed it out to us, it's the MLL look fors and the SEL look fors are not mutually exclusive. They're actually very similar and drawing from a similar pool of techniques. So while we didn't do the explicit objective, we actually did work toward it indirectly by shifting focus and working on MLL. So I think this is a place where we're starting to see that we have 3 strategic priorities with specific objectives, but a lot of them overlap. But you don't always see the overlap until you get into the work and understand it a little bit better. So that was a little bit of our learning in the year. So we're not distressed with where we are here, and we feel like this is a place where we have been putting a lot of time and energy previously. And we're pretty confident that with our new principal and some commitment next year, we'll be able to make up our time.
And strategic initiative 3, which is focusing on that inclusive, culturally competent environment. We leaned in with this iteration of the district improvement plan on the UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning, really thinking about making sure that we're planning our classrooms for all of the students we serve, and inclusion and all of the things that are included under inclusion, that every student is included with their academic, behavioral, social, emotional, cultural needs in our classroom. So we've made some progress. I would say we've made some towards some of the deliverables on this past year. And while they're wide ranging, and Pam mentioned some of the examples that are really almost integrated into a lot of the other work we're doing. For example, in the curriculum review, a big component we look at is, who is this serving all? How do we know? What does the data say? What does the research say about making sure all students are learning, right? That's an embedded part of that process. We wanted to highlight some of these examples in strategic initiative 3. So Pam mentioned the multilingual learner program review that took place. We had a few findings that we had to correct and address, which was really well timed, actually, with the work that our district wanted to do to make sure that we're being thoughtful and inclusive in all of our practices. And so we were able to address a lot of those processes, both with some programmatic redesign and restructuring, with bringing on our new multilingual learner teacher, who's both functioning as a program coordinator as well as the direct teacher to students. And she's been doing a lot of work with coaching. So she's been providing effective training to the administrative team using DESE's multilingual learner look for tool, which actually lets you think, well, what should you be looking for when you're in the classrooms across a range of domains? And they're really beautifully articulated, and it's a bit of an overwhelming document. So we've taken it over the course of the entire year. We've taken snippets of them and actually gone out to our classes to look for, and then had a chance to process and talk about what those might be and why they matter for our students. The beautiful thing about this look for tool that Pam mentioned is that for most of these components, they're going to support students with disabilities. They're going to support multilingual learners. They're going to support like a wide range of students, and frankly, even a typical student. Core foundation is this idea of, does the student see themselves in the learning and what they're doing? So a lot of that work has really helped to boost across our different efforts. We've also done some more like technical work, both with data cleanup and files, as well as actually going through the process of a curriculum review process. It was a bit more expedited because of the we have a single teacher who does the direct service with teaching students who are identified as a multilingual learner English. But had a chance to do some field testing of some different published resources, and are making the recommendation to move forward with an English language learning curriculum. So this is, if a student, we use sheltered English immersion, which means if a student is identified as a multilingual learner, we provide different supports within the classroom to make sure that they can access their grade level content. Additionally, if a student hasn't yet passed that they're meeting a certain benchmark identified by a state, we provide direct instruction in the English language development. So this is the curriculum that does that. So we actually had a chance to do some more of that really in-depth exploration, what's out there, what's current, what's aligned, had a chance to field test it with students, and are moving forward with National Geographic. And the 2 components are just grade bands. There's one that's more elementary focused and one that's more secondary. So just quick.
How many multilingual learners do we have?
That's so, Kate, is it okay? Did you want to do questions mid, or did you want to do it?
Whichever works the best for you.
I don't know that number off the top of my head. And a piece of why is we're actually going through the process right now of rescreening. There's some students that we're just making sure, and we're doing some screening assessments to make sure that we have that final number identified. I'll actually have, by Wednesday afternoon, we'll know our formal full number, and we'll be able to give you more information. But we have both students that might be identified as an English learner, which means they're getting that direct instruction. But then we also have students who are former English learners who might continue to need monitoring and support, both that from our multilingual learner teacher to make sure that they're making progress. But then she also provides those strategies that I might meet the criteria that I don't need you to teach me English, but I might still need strategic strategies embedded in my classroom. So that's another component in that layer. So we're working really hard to make sure that we have that data clean, screenings taking place, and we should have solid numbers by Wednesday to help us move forward. So I can bring that back up if that's okay. Sorry.
Before we leave this too, I just wanted to give a shout out to the work that you and Andy did around the MLL training, and that's the little exercise you set us up with the tabs of paper. I think just ended up being something we kept coming back to and really helped position us for, I'm setting this up as where we're going forward, what we're going to be doing going forward with that is a discussion among the admin team that we want to narrow the focus for our broad evaluation work next year and set up around some of these pieces for broader tracking and data collection through evaluation. So it's funny because sometimes the direct work you do to try to advance that thinking, I don't think we got to it from the direct training. We really got to it indirectly from people enjoying having that little piece that we're looking for, focus in on something instead of looking at the broad room without direction. So I think that's something, another thing just to kind of call out, which is sometimes we get to some of our forward motion by an indirect path or one we didn't anticipate. So that was it's kind of fun. So Middle School Academy and how it fits into all of this. If you've been around long enough, you know, Middle School Academy's original intent was an introduction to middle school, and it's changed in its focus over the years. With all credit to the principal, trying to be responsive to data and trying to solve some problems. Knowing we're going through a period of transition and knowing that we are doing and looking for opportunities to advance our district improvement goals, we see MSA as an opportunity. We see next year as an opportunity to reset it in the best interest of the students, and also in some of what we've identified as more areas for crucial need. Right now, for whatever reason, it's serving as almost a secondary English course where it should have a broader reach. So Heather has been a great thought partner in this over the year. We've been talking with Betty and Joe, and we have started to loop Matt in, and we'll do a little bit more work with Matt when he lands in July. He is aware of the shift. So what we're trying to do is get back to, that's okay. It's just kind of get back to its original intent. And provide students with multiple experiences through that time period and really use it in the sixth grade, in the sixth grade schedule as an opportunity to provide interventions. So Heather has worked her magic, and Amy's really good with the graphics, but the thought behind it and how to put it all together, I think not only helps kids, but it also helps to articulate visually what we're trying to accomplish broadly with our plan and how all of these pieces should fit together and not be siloed off. So do you want to talk a little bit about the vision?
Sure. I think the big piece is that if the Middle School Academy is a course that every sixth grader in our district engages in, right, that it's really becoming that foundation for secondary learning. So thinking about what are all those core components of the foundation that we're expecting our secondary learners to have at least initially developed, had exposure to, or had targeted supports to grow if for some reason they're not where we would hope for sixth graders, and that this is that place that it could live. So it's really feeling a lot like it's a hub, as a place that both there's multiple inputs in from the different focus areas where and that's that piece that Pam talked about, the revisiting back that original intent, where some of the components were things like do all students get a Chromebook, and that's a primary communication and function tool to access some of your resources? Do all kids have shared experiences, understand that foundational access point, and know how to do that responsibly and and seamlessly? but then also stretching towards that, like the unique nature of a middle school student, and they are different than elementary school students, and the middle school experience of managing across different adult classrooms. So thinking about what are those executive functioning skills that maybe were highly scaffolded and we've started to release, but now we're really expecting that increasing level of independence. So how do we not assume all students can do it, but embed that intentional strategic strategy building and support in community building around some of those routines. And then there's other pieces that we just maybe have had and have been done in pieces, but haven't had a really intentional place to live or approach. So specifically thinking two that have come up a lot in conversations and with data is around this idea of that MTSS, when we're talking about that academic intervention needs, there's an articulated program and approach in elementary school, and we're building it in middle school. But then if we know in students coming into sixth grade, what we don't want to do is wait to see how you do. We have plenty of data about our students. So starting right away to making sure that in sixth grade, if there is a potential area of need, that's immediately being addressed, and that there's a dedicated time, and it's not from something else, but it has a protected place that we can ensure that the students get that targeted, thoughtful support that's engaging in that thoughtful data identification, progress monitoring cycle with targeted intervention. And then more the holistic areas that some of those math priority skills that we also know to need. I mentioned earlier, we're going through a math curriculum review process. So that's that whole everybody, pre-K through 12, tier 1, what does math need to look like? And there's data that's telling us there's priority needs that are more holistic. So how do we also use this as a space to target some of those components? The other pieces that continue to come up, both because of developmental age and because we're hearing that feedback from families and from our staff around social emotional learning, social skill development, and some of those academic and research-based skills that sort of happen to become increasingly expected in that middle school level, and provide that really structured support so that we're targeting those student needs. I think the other piece with this design is that it's really there's a lot happening in this hub. So there's a lot of different components, and students are going to have different needs in this space, and that it's something that that teacher that is managing this ecosystem is leading and coordinating, but there's a lot of partnerships that are taking place. So we're seeing that like intentional partnership with our digital literacy specialists, partnering with our interventionists, partnering with our counseling and support staff, that this is a place that that person is actually coordinating with to make sure that the group is getting the thing that everybody needs, and then the students who may have more targeted supports or specific needs has that support and space, and that organization is happening. All through this idea that there's some grounding shared experiences that we're using, a driving question that students are having a chance to be thinking about. What does this mean for me as I'm entering this secondary learning space? Where do I want to go as a learner? Where do I potentially want to go in my career? How are we using some of the work that the state has identified through MyCap to drive thinking about myself as a learner, as a person, and that engaging in some of these strategic instructional components to then be thinking about what does that mean for me, getting a chance to practice and apply some of that, the cycles of what we're building in the skill building, with those engaging, like having an anchoring question each month, and then having the students have a chance to then think and reflect on and respond to that. And not going.
So the MyCap piece that Heather mentioned is part of, if you recall earlier in the year, we needed to articulate how we were going to communicate to kids around the opportunity to go to the tech. So beyond that, we also have been given the responsibility to ensure we start them on career building beginning in sixth grade. So we thought this was a natural place for this to live. And that would be a new piece that's added to the concept. Everything on the left, executive functioning, tech and digital citizenship, research and academic skills. And I would say social emotional, MTSS wasn't quite developed. Those four were all the original components of Middle School Academy. What ended up happening is it drifted into more ELA support. What Heather has what we have identified collectively, the community, the students, and the staff, is that math is a everybody need right now. So that would see as an articulated component of it, where ELA needs don't fall off, but they're more individualized and will be addressed in MTSS along with higher level math skills. So we think it has a lot of promise. We think it actually is a great illustration of the interconnectedness of all of the work. And, we are looking forward to launching this next year. I'm sure it won't be ideal out of the gate and we'll hit some stumbling blocks, but I think it has a lot of promise to support students. When we get into seventh and eighth grade, under the model, there are blocks in the schedule that allow for MTSS and some of these other opportunities to be embedded. So it's not like it drops off completely after sixth grade, but because sixth grade has the MSA as the fifth block, sixth grade kids have fewer exploratory blocks to fill. So it doesn't go away, it just changes forms as kids mature through the system. So I'm sure there'll be tons of questions, and that's a lot of information.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm just curious, this might be a question for Matt when you join, about dedicated planning time for all of those stakeholders to coordinate and collaborate.
That's a great question.
Let's move through.
Yeah, the rest is not to give short
I feel like
Through
we're almost
to-
through
to the business section.
Yeah.
But
and then we'll go
as I
through.
typically say, when we get to this is stuff, this section is the one we all typically journey through together. So I think we're in good shape. We did not set yearly deliverables. We set more big picture for the 3-year deliverables. So we just want to give you a quick update on some of what we were able to accomplish. This is we're not driving, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So most of these you're going to recognize because we've had extensive conversations. So I think we're making effective progress on budget and resource management. We achieved the budget we wanted. We have a game plan for E&D, and OPEB funding, and continue to use the zero-based budgeting approach in special education to align resources with student needs. Actually, it's the model area where annually it is built from the ground up. And staffing and resources are adjusted based on where student needs are. So that's where we typically see the most movement from year to year in staffing, resource, location. We've done modified versions of it district-wide. We think it's most effective there for the moment, but it's something we're looking to emulate throughout. Capital planning, I think the Essex building project is moving on schedule as we anticipated. We're going into schematic design. You've heard plenty of updates on that. I think we have been able to expand forecasting of the facilities and capital needs. That Habib report, now that we're in full launch with the Essex building project and it's being managed through the whole MSBA process, we have really started to account for and look back at the Habib report and work with facilities to start charting the needs of this building. And I don't want to get everybody stressed out with the level of investments we're going to need, but it's starting to show itself. But I think we're growing in confidence that we have a handle on it and we'll be able to articulate it and head some things off at the past. So what we can address now, we will. What needs to wait to 2034 can be articulated and we'll feel comfortable about it. We can't, there can always be an emergency, but we don't see anything on the horizon. Well, thank you. Yep. I think you've been privy to some conversations about how we're trying to match our staffing models to our structures and needs. We continue to do that, similar to what special education does. I think we see less movement in the general practice just because of some of our stumbling blocks. And then we've developed a stipend restructuring tool. So this has been on our list for a while. I don't want to read the whole slide to you. So we have been working since we closed negotiations, a year and a half at least, on the joint labor management group to review stipends. So we have been working on professional stipends and student activity stipends, either one or the other or both at the same time for a great deal of time now. We are getting down to the wire where we have some competing proposals, but not complete agreement.
It's been like 3 years.
And when we get to questions, anyone can speak to it. When you've been at the negotiating table, there's a lot of vested interest in what we have and a lot of different perspectives on where it should go. I think what we're trying to do with both professional and student activities is ground them in what the students need, not necessarily what has been historically in place or we're most comfortable with. So there's a significant proposal for the reorganization of the professional stipends to try to help advance some of the work And there's a reorganization of the student activities stipends into tighter classifications for what we're proposing what we need for hours as opposed to hours put in. So it just takes some time to work through. And it's all positive work. It's not, it's in a good place. It's just to find the time and get people come to decisions. We're hoping to maybe get someplace with it in July and have something for you in August, but it may end up being part of the overall negotiation. So, that's underway, and then
They come to consensus on the athletics stipends though. So that was an initial piece that.
There we go.
Yep.
Yeah, so 1/3 of it.
you are working on the funding and partnerships. We're going to be looking at school choice and student activity fees. And one example of the non-academic grants that we've pursued is Michelle has been very active in trying to build electric bus grants into the transportation bid process. So we are optimistic on that. And then we're always looking for those opportunities to collaborate with other districts, but I haven't gotten quite that far. This is one piece that's taken up quite a bit of the tech team time. They are looking deeply at our internal structures, and our focus has been on cybersecurity preparedness. So we anticipate some investment in some reviews and some reorganization of our network and some enhancement tools to protect us against cyber.
Does the state provide any support in this area?
And that's it. I mean, that's kind of the summary. There's plenty to discuss. So we've been talking at you for a while, and this is the abbreviated version.
Great, thank you both. It's always very exciting when we get Heather to sit down with us and give us all of these things to be
Thank you for
excited.
letting me steal all your hours.
I'm sure that there are questions or comments that people like to make, so.
So we do it in two parts, like the plan overall and MSA, or one mix them all together?
That's a good point. Well, actually,
My strategy.
but some of mine overlap.
Yeah,
How could I know?
yeah.
Pam, they're having the same conversation we're having. We haven't heard it's going.
Let's just do let's do two passes and see where we
There it
go.
goes. Okay.
Want to start, Jake?
Sure. I will start with my broad comments and save my MSA comments for a little bit. Next round. Maybe. So first of all,
What is it?
I appreciate all the work that has gone into particular PD and training. I think we all, when we talked about this last fall or whenever we approved it, it was very much a year of laying additional groundwork, right? So I hear that and I appreciate that, and I'm hearing a lot of potential through that. So keep that ball rolling. And this would be a familiar refrain for you. What I don't hear in any of this is what's the outcome or impact of this, and maybe it's because it's still at the teacher training level. You can't report on that yet, but I'll keep putting it out there every time we bring this up. Like, how is student experience changing because of all this effort?
Yep.
And I don't hear any of that either. So if you have something to say about that now, great. Otherwise, I'll just keep hammering that on.
I think keep hammering it, and I'm not going to speak for Heather, but right now, being just a few months into it, I feel like when we got to the end point of the district improvement plan, we were able to structure around what it's looking for kids after the efforts. I don't think we know that yet. I think it's too, on these particular goals, we're too new into it. If you're seeing something that's jumping out at you from your perspective, I think we're still kind of in that foundational phase at this point.
Yeah, I would say, I would agree with that when it connects to the plan. I would say there's aspects of work that's taken place that might be more like, I talked through some examples of curriculum review, but then there's other places that there's been more action taken that we probably have some measurable outcomes, and think about how do we share what that looked like and where it led to. Like, the one popping to mind is world language, because they're further along in their curriculum review process. And so I think we probably could have some components there. So thinking about effective and efficient ways to share when there could be many lists of things about that piece. So yes, it's a good question, because I think each one of these are often examples of just the work we're doing that we we are ongoing in an ongoing way collecting that measurable, but then there's somebody said to me like an outcome that we need to measure. So there's both that sort of formative ongoing piece and then that where we expect. So I think it's a good thing to continue to ask. And I think us thinking about like, how do we make sure that we're providing that? Like,
So not
what
going
we're
through
looking at.
just the in the moment pieces we're, I don't want to say struggling with, but we're struggling like we're moving forward. We're trying to develop and looking back at some that may be in their lawn.
Where we are further along and then like doing that reflective
That
back.
makes sense.
I think we can do that piece. Thank you.
I feel like we sometimes get pieces of them during school presentations because of where then we're bringing it back to specific student groups. But if we could, it would be
Link
really
it in.
nice to tie it all
Yep.
together.
Yeah, I think there's ones where we've got.
Anything else, Rick?
I'll save my MSA for the next one.
I have one MSA question, so I can save that. My one question was about multilingual learners, and so we're not exactly sure of the numbers, which is totally fine. Report back, but there's one faculty member who is both the MLL coordinator, teacher, and coaching other teachers.
Yes.
So that's one person, or that's a department?
It is, yes. Andy is our department. It's a really interesting role. And I don't really know that there's another role that's quite like it. So she's a little bit like a special education teacher that she's like watching deadlines, dates, assessments, reporting to the state. But then she's also like direct service to kids. So she's also like a liaison. She's providing that direct instruction. I would say this numbers are wildly variable. They're small, but they're small and spread across different schools. So it's a role that's really, if you look just at numbers, it's hard to articulate what it is. And she really done an incredible job, especially in this first year, to really, we've been working really closely thinking like, what does that routine system look like? And then be thinking about the piece. But I would say one of the biggest aspects of the roles is the coaching and collaborating with teachers, because more of our students are at levels that they may not need the direct English instruction from her, or when they do need it, it's not as intensive, but they're in those classrooms and need those really specific strategies to make those effective practice in the classroom. So she
Sounds vital.
she
And I just want
is.
to make sure this
She
role,
is.
I just want to throw out there that this role feels like a lot.
On the record, we are a low incidence district, so
Yes.
we cover in the single to below single digit.
That's why I think the numbers would be helpful
Yeah.
for me to.
Yeah.
I think Heather is doing a hard count, so she doesn't want to give a number
Yeah,
that's
that's
not.
fair.
I really want to be precise because what we haven't really done as a state is named what are our, who's our English, who is learning English, and then who's a former English learner who's still requiring the monitoring and the assessment, and then also that coaching, because it's a more broad net than I think we've appropriately reflected before. So thank you for asking that. And I agree, the role is incredibly impactful. Yeah.
Right.
She's provided a lot of PD, not just to the administrative team, but over to the staff through staff meetings and PD days over the course of the year. It's been a
Grateful
big.
to her for her hard work.
I'd be sure she's
Just a clarification, you said state and defined it, did you mean district? Because the state has definitions for both those terms.
So we haven't named our number. We haven't given those sort of shared reports, sort of like when we're talking about our populations as a district. I don't think we've always reflected that numbers, because we'll pull the DESI reports for sure. But then even students who might be out of monitoring and some of them going me some pieces that.
Yeah, we'll typically report.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. You just had me thinking about SEL and looking at SEL in one bucket and how since COVID, SEL's migrating into the instructional learning place. So I guess I'm just curious if teachers have been talking about the embedded SEL practices, instructional strategies as they explore new curriculum. Like how to better marry the two so that it's more practical for kids to apply.
It's a good question. I would say, the places I've seen it recently have been the places that I think it's almost like a coherent look, like thinking about that universal design, thinking about multilingual learners and representation, thinking about access to students with disabilities, and thinking about that SEL component of people feeling connected, seen, heard, voices, and representation. Like it's almost like those have become a cornerstone of when we're looking at how are we meeting that needs of all the learners in that really holistic way? So I can say in the history social, the one that's coming to mind, for example, is history social science. It's setting the vision. A lot of the work that was talked about is how do we understand what's happened through history and through cultures and through society, while also thinking about ourselves, our experiences, and our knowledge in our local region. So like there are places that we might be looking for it, and a lot of it's been within the content areas. I would say the specific practices when you think about like the CASTLE competencies in the social emotional learning and finding those embedded in the curriculum. I don't know that we've done as much in the core content to pull those out. Some of the work we've been doing in some of the content areas, maybe not in an active curriculum review and curriculum mapping. There's components in the curriculum maps where you can actually name these are some of the social emotional skills or CAST competencies that this unit can focus on and lean into. For example, our PE Health has done a lot of curriculum mapping this year, and we're actually naming some of those skills and competencies. So it's embedded, not necessarily as a standalone step. And I think that's that piece that Pam mentioned, like it's not happening, but it's been a little bit on this like iterating on a piece. I think the chance to name what is the tier one, like almost standalone pieces, but then where are the places that naturally integrated, especially as you get to the more mature students and thinking about where does it live. Teachers are doing it a lot with thinking about like text selection, which titles are we thinking about. Yeah, but
Thinking about an ELA.
exactly. So I think it's happening. Do I think it's happening in a systemic, organized way? No. And that's the work we need to do.
And maybe this is the transition.
I think it's a great transition time because the district before I was here, the district did a lot of work leading into thinking about social emotional learning for a long time. So that like foundational knowledge of educators is there, but then how do we think about not as like we did the SEL, now I'm going to teach my content, but it's a way, yeah, that's that next step, and that like iterating on this work at that next level is the work that we need to do in the team.
It's almost overcoming our entry point into SEL because ours came as a countermeasure to high pressure academic environment. So we didn't necessarily approach it as integrated at first to try to get people's knowledge base up. It was we need to be mindful of that. So now it's getting them to hold both thoughts at the same time and integrate them. So that we did start earlier than the big push because we were seeing a lot of test scores pressure in one training. So I think it's really interesting place.
It's exciting stuff. I am happy to chat.
I'll see you soon.
Call me. Yeah.
It's so happy. I'm like moving.
Chris, any questions or comments?
No, it's tough.
I will save my MSA for my NSA. Sort of. Well, I think that there's a lot that falls under that conversation. There's a lot of overlap. I will just say, since Sarah's bringing up the SEL stuff, I am grateful for this work because I have noticed that we have some teachers who are implementing really cool, innovative, engaging tools, but that those tools are not necessarily available across grade levels or outside of even within a grade level from one classroom to another, and that for a kid who needs that SEL support can be confusing or just that's helpful as it could be. But there's the fact that it's there to begin with and that it's great and being used in the settings that it's in tells us that there is a need for it and the students will use it if it's available. And so having some common language to use around that and common practices would be fantastic. And it looks like we're working towards that soon for that.
Just when we talk about implementing inclusive curriculum, can we also consider neurodivergent?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's that piece when we're broadening our lens. The strategic initiative 3 was originally written. It's not originally. It is written in the strategic plan as cultural competency. But what we realize is that what we're talking about is making sure that all students are heard, seen, and able to meet the goals of the classroom learning in that space. So, you know, stepping back in this district improvement plan, thinking about that universal design for learning, that goal is that you're not making something that only fits, you know, a shoe that only fits size 6, but really rather something that like any student that comes in that has that need can access that learning, and that we're not saying, well, you're a little different, so now I need to make something for you, but rather on the front end, thinking about, I'm going to have a range of learners that are coming and approaching it from a wide range of needs, students who are maybe already reading 2 grade levels above, 2 grade levels below, who have different communication needs, who have all of these different, you know, aspects of both their learning self and then their personal self, and that we're planning for these range of learners that are coming into our classroom. So that shift in this strategic initiative 3, while I highlighted multilingual learner, that is not the only place that we're focusing in, because we're really needing to step back and think about what we can't do anymore is assume that the delivery of content or even the instructional engaging activities that have previously done are going to continue to meet the needs of all of our learners. Our students are looking increasingly more diverse in their profiles, and their needs are not necessarily at the same place that they may have been 10 years ago, 5 years ago, for a range of different needs. So that intent is really to broaden it. So we're not just thinking about racial or cultural backgrounds, but we're thinking about that as well as learning differences, background experiences, linguistic differences, and that, you know, broad scope. So that just assume you're going to have a range of learners in your room, and how do we make it so our learning experiences are going to be appropriately effective for all of them to meet that grade level experience while also meeting them where they're at. So that's the goal. That's the work. Simple little thing. No, it's, you know, it's really just maintaining that focus that that the students in front of us are going to be presenting with both a range of needs and a range of opportunities for us to be thinking differently about our practice, and both looking at what materials we do, but how do we do them, pacing, supports, and that wide range of needs. So that's what we're
Probably important to note too, that as we are things we need to do to shift, that everything Heather just described about our student body exists for the adults that teach them. Now, everybody's coming at this with a different philosophy instead of training and different entry point into education, but just kind of crafted their outlook about what kids can or can't do, or where they need help, or how that help should look. So while we can present to you all of the steps that we're taking and all of what we see and know to be, the real work comes after the plans are written, in having the patience and the support network to help people move and feel comfortable moving forward, because it can be as scary for the adult as it is for the child. And I don't think we touch on that enough, because we can create our checklists and our roadmap of how to get there, but we, the principals, can't make it happen in every classroom, but we can support people who are willing to grow and change. So that's usually where it starts to feel our patience sometimes gets tried, because it is evident what needs to happen, but it's not always easy to shift the people where it needs to be.
All right,
You ready?
round 2.
All right, so, well, let me start by saying thank you for this conversation about MSA, because this is what I was hoping for and somewhat advocated for at our last meeting, so I appreciate that we're having this conversation about the program and, you know, what we want for our students, our children's experience in the program. So thank you for setting this up. I will preface my comments by saying I do not like this plan. And for 2 reasons. One, my family's experience with MSA was more project oriented. It's the place that I point to when I talk to others about authentic learning. Like, that was the place in 6th grade where my child experienced that more than any place else. And I do not hear anything about authentic learning relative to the definition that we have that's in this. What I hear in this, and this is my second reason, I hear this being an intervention and remediation class. And if we do not like the fact that it has become a second ELA course, I definitely don't like the fact that it's becoming a second math course. We should fix the math program. I also don't like the fact that we are putting so much of the initiatives that we're talking about here in the strategic plan on one teacher and in one place. I know you're not acting that way, but that's the way it comes across when it's put in this form, all in one graphic in one course. And it will functionally, in my opinion, slow down all the other efforts. If everybody says, oh, we have that over in MSA, I don't have to do that in my class. So to me, this, especially if you got some students doing MTS and others not, what, you know, they're going to have two different experiences depending on their incoming background and ability or whatnot, experiences. And that's only going to, you know, add to the differentiation. So to me, and by the way, I will say, I hear and agree with everything you're trying to accomplish. I don't have any argument with what you're trying to accomplish. What I have an argument with is putting it all in this class. So to me, that this reads more like an intervention or remediation class than it does, let's learn how to, well, what I want it to be is, you know, about authentic learning. That's what I want it to be.
I'm confused by what about this tells us how the students are getting these skills, right? To me, I see like these are the skills that we want them to gain through the activities of this classroom. But to me, it doesn't say what the activities are. And if the activity is an authentic learning activity, like I can think, and I'm sure that you can too, working in education, think of projects that bring all of these skills together in really cool, creative ways. And I would bet that whatever your son did in MSA incorporated tons of this.
Very, very well. May have. I don't hear any of that, right? What I hear are, all right, we're going to, you know, develop and practice core skills. List. There is not anything in here about what the nature of the experience is going to be. And the range of what's here is, I would actually make that quite difficult, right? And I don't disagree with anything that's here. Again, I hear the intent, right? I hear the need. What I don't want is this to be the place that happens, right? This stuff should be happening across the curriculum, right? And that's what we're working towards in the strategic plan, right? But this suggests that this is where it happens, not across the curriculum.
Yeah, I think that what I heard was that we are focusing on these skills for sixth graders because that middle school transition can be so difficult. And they're being required to put a lot of this together for the first time. What I think that I lose you at the assumption that they won't become, I didn't hear that they won't be covered in other classes also.
Can we confirm that?
Well, I mean, are we covering
Like math,
SEL,
should be covered in math.
to digital literacy, research and academic skills in other classes in sixth grade? Is that really the question?
And I guess why is it being called out here as the focus here in MSA?
I think it's because, well, I don't want to speak for you, but in my mind, it is the launch pad for transitioning from elementary school to middle of high school. So this is where the students are getting concrete, hopefully project-based learning, authentic learning experiences around core skills that they will need. We're doing this right in every class as they move up every year across their grades. So this in my mind is like a foundation perhaps to help students transition from elementary school to middle school and then build on these critical skills. And I think I have a question for you, Jake, too. I'm just really curious, what was can you give an example of one of the really meaningful, authentic learning experiences your child had in MSA?
Can I identify a specific one off the top of my head? No, it's been a few
That's
many
fair.
years, yeah.
I was just,
But
The piece thing, right?
it was there were multiple projects, yeah.
I was just really curious, because I'm actually like,
Yeah.
that sounds cool.
Oh,
I'm actually asking.
Yeah, so I mean, just to answer your questions, when the 4 bullets, you know, the ongoing over the course of the year, 4 bullets are targeted math skill building, right? That sounds like remediation to me. When it's MTSS academic interventions for some. That is targeted intervention
Sorry,
skill.
where are you reading from?
We're on
Right,
this
off the,
paper that we got.
off the paper. Right, MTSS SEL interventions for some, right? The only one there that could have, in my interpretation, that broader perspective is products following each unit to showcase learning. That has potential. I don't know what that means. That has potential for, project and authentic learning, but I would appreciate it if it actually used our authentic learning language rather than this.
But
Because then it would have.
so we can use that, right? Can we use that as our common starting ground that we are going to build towards this product following each unit?
So-
And can we assume, or you don't want to, like,
I don't want to assume because I've made too many assumptions in this district that are not the case. So I am not here to argue and redesign the course here. That is not my intent. My intent is to convey how this comes across to me as a parent, as an educator, and as a school committee member. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to
Okay.
redesign it here. That's, I'm just trying to share my concerns about
That's
how
fair.
it reads to me.
fair enough? I would just ask that you not assume anything either, right? Just because it doesn't say that it's going to do something, doesn't mean that it won't do.
That's very possible, but my experience has been that it doesn't happen.
Well, it also doesn't say it, the course overview you talk about.
About,
Authentic learning.
but we have that as a district strategic, like,
Understood.
The whole
That
district-
absence of reference to authentic learning. We've got that. Check. We can thread that back in.
And
let's see.
I think
sorry,
one thing we're trying to accomplish first, a little context, why there is a blueprint is because depending on the year your child took MSA, MSA was designed by the teacher in the seat at the time, and that's problematic to our broader goals and objectives. So while I think I said this may stumble, it may get another iteration before the year begins or after the year ends. We're trying to provide a blueprint for what it is supposed to be, so it is not a course that reflects the interests of the teacher or the moment. So yes, I think when Jake's son was in there, I'm guessing it was Vidula, and Vidula had a series of many English language based projects, and there was a very long ago history of it being a literacy skills course, which some folks who've been here a long time, it's hard to get that out of our system. So I think this provides a really good working blueprint going forward to lay the groundwork for what the intention of the course was, which is a bridge course into the middle school. To address all the things that suddenly drop out of your schedule, including time. So when you leave fifth grade and come to sixth grade, you lose explicit instruction in technology. You lose library research. You lose well-defined MTS intervention time blocks. So you're getting taken out of specials to go and get support. So you're missing things you might enjoy. So yes, this does serve as a time where kids can get multiple things and not have to not be in their math class, not be in their English class, or miss PE, because PE might be what the kid really enjoys. The other piece that we lose, or we have heard lots of feedback from staff, families, is the idea of kids getting themselves organized to manage 7 different adults during the day, 7 different shifts, a rotating block schedule. In fact, they have less time in those content areas than they did previously. So executive functioning, maybe we need a better phrase, but back in the day, study skills, like how to get kids prepared to keep track and organize themselves in this new environment. And yeah, we're hearing a lot of deficits in terms of stamina and social emotional skills that we're still trying to remediate for loss in school. So we are trying to accomplish some of those things in this environment, and it's very much conceived of as a team effort because there are lessons and there are opportunities and learning we would like to deliver with the experts in our building. But we're the counselor, there is no place for the adjustment counselor to push into math. Math is going to meet 4 times a week for 45 to 50 minutes. There's no place for that person there as much as we want to make space for them. there's no place really to push in the tech integration specialist unless he's co-teaching with somebody. If there's some explicit lessons we'd like to teach kids about social media, about bias, about the digital environment that they need to be wary of being in, about how to take care of their full. So there are some very basic skills pieces in this. It does not prevent us from having some I'm going to go right to the product piece again, because that seems to be where we're at. Some authentic learning strands weaved in here. And I think some of the MyCap might lend itself to that work, because that's a whole self-investigation of who I am as a learner, who I want to be as a human being. So there are a lot of nuggets in here that we can better articulate to show you where we see authentic learning opportunities for kids. It may be less project-based and less demonstration-based, but I think some of the underlying threads, which we have been, asked to articulate to a greater extent, can exist in here and help to develop the skills where they may be producing product with it.
I personally, this makes me excited when I see it, because I do think having a sixth grader this year, he had a good experience this year, but I think this is a really also a good shift as far as like reading the room and things that could be improved. I like the idea of that this is a blueprint that does have some crucial elements that we've identified in the strategic plan or in student needs at its core as like kind of the skeleton or the foundation. But then the teacher, it excites me as like a teacher to look at this and say like, oh, like they could do this. They could do, and the teacher, I think, is the one who's going to be teaching this, probably working with the principal too, who's incoming, who, will bring some expertise here, to craft it. Like, I don't want to dictate to them, and then you have to do this project, then you have to do that project. Like, they're going to bring their own creativity and ideas, and, we can accept the expectation with language in here about project-based
And there
learning.
will be a unit sequence for them.
Yeah.
That will interweave all of these pieces into it. It's on development. We need to work with that. Just
Yeah.
hear it, but
Yeah.
there will be additional to this as well.
Yeah.
And there's one person we see one person as coordinator.
Yeah.
Not one person as sole deliverer of content.
Okay. I think my only, so this is, I personally like this. My question was, I've been hearing from sixth graders in my orbit that the writing this year that they did at MSA was very helpful to them. And I'm curious if that instruction will be intentionally like shifted into literature class. Because I don't see writing, research and academic skills, maybe writing falls under there, but will that shift into literature class? Will it live as part of this class? Will it live somewhere else? Because I think we've heard I have personally heard some compelling anecdotes from kids about writing and how help the instruction, and it was intensive and maybe they needed more than just that. But that the instruction itself was helpful. So where does that live under this new launch?
Should live in the ELI.
In ELA, yeah, that's what I figured. And that is
But if a student individual needs assistance in there, I think there's space for that here as well.
but there will be an intentional shift then in the ELA curriculum to
She's been living there now.
make space for the writing the writing instruction that was in. That would be great.
It lives in ELA.
Yes. Thank you. That's what I assumed.
And math priority skills, I think no one disagrees with a systemic approach for long-term change. But if we don't have a systemic approach to implement tomorrow, and getting us there is going to take some time. We have clearly identified that there's a broad need for some support in bridging the gap. So we think this is a place where that can live for the time being until there is a more systemic approach.
Brief. I like the blueprint as well. And as a middle school teacher, I'm excited about a lot of these ideas and like thinking about middle school kids in 2026 and how they have drastically changed over the course of the last decade. They just have. They have needs that I don't even always feel prepared for after 2 decades of working. I guess there's 2 things I'm thinking about. I think the co-teaching on the bottom of your graphic, the co-teaching piece is going to be essential to this really being a vision that is great for kids, great for teachers, great for learning. And I keep coming back to like, how are these teachers and people and stakeholders going to have time to plan? So that's something I just have to keep in the forefront. But the other thing I'm just thinking about, and that I think we should just be mindful of, it's like parents, and the developmental age of a middle school student. They don't really have their piece of the day in a middle school so fast. They don't have a chance to catch their breath like they do in elementary school at recess, or like for the teacher to just say, like, read the room, we need a minute. I think it's so important for them to have a place to catch their breath where they can work with SEL strategies, and maybe they do a little writing through SEL to like have a journal reflection, or just a place where the teacher can speak to what they need in that moment. And it's not going to all come together every day. Like Pam said, like, I don't, who knows what this could look like. I would be excited to see what it could do for kids. So I love the idea. If we can launch it, and we can make sure that the teacher, the supports to be able to make it happen.
I think to your point, on the planning time, I think that on the upside of that is most of the push-in people are not classroom.
Right, yeah.
So their flexible schedule is going to allow them, will give us a better opportunity to prepare people for planning. Some of this was attempted through the schedule this year with those floating blocks in the 7th and 8th grade. So there was a lot of vision around being able to leverage those for the upperclassmen to create specialty courses or opportunities. It was harder to do than originally conceived of because of when the schedule got put together. So I think Joe has been thinking a lot about this, and how it might be able to look and how we can schedule people together. You made another comment that was resonating with me, but I lost it now. So I think that's an opportunity for us. The downside. There's also the me block that's being reintroduced, but for a 20-minute dose, which is good downtime for the kids. I think one of my concerns would be if we don't have other places for this to live, me time, because we're not going to call it me, but it's the me block, the 20-minute block is going to turn into trying to do all of these things.
Oh, so they have a separate block for everyone.
They don't currently.
But they will.
It's
And then
beginning
this
to.
will be more intentional
Mhm.
with, that's key. Because they don't, not many middle schools ever have a break.
When we do the recess, I mean, it's not,
My kids would argue you do not.
we did. They get a outdoor breath for part of the day. So there is the me block for that, a little bit of downtime and touch base.
But even for the counselor to have that time to do instruction, counselors do have lesson plans that they want to execute. And it's always a challenge for school counselors to get in to see all of the kids, so that they can make sure that they're able to get out of just being in a responsive mode.
And for kids to have a relationship. with
Yes,
them, so
yes.
that when they actually need that person, they already know that person.
And just, I'll say one more thing, but the library piece, I still feel like we really need to have a library. And so if we're making the library a living thing in this time as well, I think that would be, there's a lot to bite off, but it could look a lot of different ways with the right creative person spirit.
Do you reply?
No, I mean, so just in general, I mean, this is interesting, but I do tend to agree with Jake a little bit that I think there's, ways that this could, as you mentioned, kind of just go into remedial work, and I'm not even sure what that would look like or how that would even be sort of done, because it is a lot. So I just would, I don't know if it's possible for us to get just updates on this, and not that, again, I'm going to be the one to necessarily give recommendations on how this is structured, but I just think that it's a lot. And I think that you brought up some valid points about what this could become versus, but if that's what, it needs to become, your point about, if this becomes more just remedial, then, what are kids doing that don't need it just, like, some of this doesn't make sense to me in terms of how it would actually be executed.
So I guess I'm to help there.
You don't understand what I was saying.
I envision a centers concept where you're organizing multiple activities in the classroom at one time. And some days you're going to be focused, have like a focus on, maybe we'll do the MyCap lessons. So maybe every Thursday of the month or every sixth class, we have the counselors coming in to do the MyCap lessons. But like on the first 3 courses of the week, the first 3 meetings of the week, we're doing, MTSS on one of the blogs, then on one of the blogs doing research. It's just a matter of sitting and planning your centers in your flow of the year and using the data to drive what each of the kids need, where their individual time, and then coming up with the whole group times as part of the schedule. So that's where the teacher comes into play in terms of organizing the time of the players. So I guess that's my vision. It's kind of a centers concept.
Just to clarify, I don't see anything about remediation. Like, there's nothing in here that says remediation. Like, that I see like targeted skills.
I mean, I think they're getting it from interventionists.
Yeah, and interventionists don't necessarily remediate either, like.
Okay.
Yeah, I just think we just have to be careful about like what that looks like, because teachers are constantly having to teach and intervene and to teach kids at a different entry point, because they're all coming to you at a different entry point. So that's happening in every kid's classroom across their day, every day, So I wouldn't see that this would be any different.
I will build on that for my point and say that there is not a single 6th grader in the world who doesn't need to work on something. And even the kids who are the most academically advanced usually have some other area that needs to be built up, whether it's that metacognitive piece or that social awareness or whatever it is. There is no 6th grader and there's no person in the world, but especially no 6th grader, I can tell you, who doesn't need to work on something. I love this vision. I love the concept. I see Jake's concerns and I see Chris's concerns. I guess that my question to those concerns is, how will the content, curriculum, and instructional methods be developed and planned for this course?
In time for.
And that seems like a huge project. It's a really exciting project for me because that's kind of the world that I live in now, but it's huge also. And September is right around the corner. Right now that we're talking about the end of the school year. That seems like a lot. I'm really excited to see this whole.
So Heather's taking a lot of notes, and I don't mean to keep speaking over her. There is a draft blueprint month by month for the year that we're going to go through with Matt when he arrives. And a lot of what exists on this page already exists as curriculum, or it just needs to be threaded together.
But I see. It's funny because when Jake says that his concern is that there's nothing about it being authentic, which there is, Jake, I found it's in the bottom right corner.
Where?
Culminates in authentic student
A
product.
lot of stuff we did.
Sorry, my glasses aren't back.
But see, no, but this, like. Taking what you said, I actually see like the potential for such really authentic, really cool intercurricular, cross-curricular. Projects that could be done here that would build all of these.
And it's just something that's popping in my head. So under math priority skills, I could envision, and it may be in the map, I just may not be aware of it, that's a place to reintroduce some of the math explorers work. That was well developed at Memorial and never really got off the ground at Essex, which was totally project based. It was identify a problem, create a solution, and then build it. So you're going to have kids, if we know what the math priority skills are, broad brush for the whole class, you can definitely create a project that's designed to build those skills through an active hands-on activity. And then deal through your MTSS interventions with more targeted skill building. But it's an opportunity to do it in a fun way. That's off the top of my head. That's, I should know better than to do that in a public session.
Jake,
But I think there's opportunities there for us to better articulate work with this.
I did look up because you piqued my interest of what the project was that Mrs. planted when Sebastian was in sixth grade, and it was Plant the Moon, where they had lunar soil and they had to, each group, she had a grant for it, each group had to decide what they thought would grow the best in the lunar soil. They got to, it was really cool, but there are so many cross-curricular opportunities in there that projects like that could build all of these skills.
I just hope that these same conversations like that are having across classes, not just you.
And then I think that it is already red running through all of these conversations, but the math priority skills and intervention won't do anything in the absence of tier one. Strong tier one math instruction. Period. That's it.
I think you've covered a lot of the ground. I think what I'm interested in is what are your measures of success? So, so maybe go forward with this a year from now, how will you be able to for yourself determine what's a successful or not? Where do we have opportunities to improve? Because you are going to do a lot of different things. So I would advocate that whatever you implement be something that's better.
I have another question that you might not be able to answer. It's just a quick one. Is parent engagement or like communication with parents,
Homeschool communication.
is that also the role of this teacher? Because the teacher's gonna have such a holistic view of all the kids in the room if this is the model is successful. Is that also, that seems like a big ask, but does it live here? Where would it live? You know, I just.
It should look every teacher for their assigned course. This isn't a team leader. This is kind of a hub for the concern.
Okay, thank you.
I see your.
To a certain
person would have.
Yeah,
Insights, but
it's reminding me of
an elementary classroom. If you kind of look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, all of it
45 minutes a day.
and 45 minutes a day. But it's not unlike a classroom model that has a lot of different strands to juggle at once and having to find creative ways to find overlap when necessary, go explicit when necessary, and tie it together with other activities. Really tired, so my words are.
Yeah,
I guess quick. I like it. I think a diagram like this can make it seem very overwhelming, but I mean, for any of us who've had a classroom, think back to your classroom, there are 6 balls in the air on any given day. And you have to figure out a way to pull them all together and organize that time.
I think the message is that we are very excited about it. We are curious about the direction. And unfortunately, for you guys, you have a school committee that is made up largely of educators. A lot of.
Oh, it's the best part.
And I would say it's not intended to be absent the authentic authentic language, authentic learning language. I think we thought we were getting at it in an indirect way, but we can make it clearer.
I'm just thinking.
You're getting at it authentically.
Piece that like, and I'm just thinking of a colleague I have who does this amazing like group museum. But she gives the kids like SEL competencies in their groups. They have roles. They need to stick to that role to work together. And like this, all of these, the visual on the left could be all one project. And all of those skills are woven together. And it could be incredibly cool.
I'm not denying that.
Yeah.
There's absolute potential here. I'm just saying, if we're going to caution ourselves about assumptions, which I have now been cautioned multiple times on this committee, we have to be cautious that we aren't assuming that that will happen either, without some evidence of it.
Fair enough. Great. Well, thank you.
I'll say we are excited about it. I think it has great potential. And I think I started by saying, and I am sure we're gonna hit some stumbling blocks because things that might look simple and direct to us may not others, but it's gonna be a team effort and we're gonna make.
If we do it well, I think honestly, just like this sort of conversation, like I think it is gonna become iterative. There's gonna be aspects of it that are inputs that this is a good place to live because right now they're interrupting other. So because this is something that we won't have to pause learning, there are some things that will have to live here. For example, one of the pieces is taking your iReady assessments rather than taking time out of your core content areas. We can do it in this place because it's not going to actually pause your continued instruction in that. For example, right? Do I think that's like a rich, rigorous, authentic learning experience? No. Do I think it's important for us to monitor student growth and learning? Yes. So there's pieces that I think will be that. But I think this idea of this iterative thought of like thinking about where our students are, what they need, that there's a lot of this that can absolutely be integrated. And there's a lot that needs to be explicitly taught and then brought in as a chance to apply and practice. So I think a bit of this is something that can I give you an exact precise thing of what it's going to look like in June? Right now? No. And I do think that there's going to be a really fantastic group of staff that across the school are really dedicated to working with their sixth graders that do it in the margins already, who are thrilled to be doing this really thoughtful and intentional collaborative work. I trust that both with establishing what that expectation is on behalf of our students, and then, as you said, attending to the way we want that learning space to look and feel for our learners. I think that is something that this just feels like a really exciting opportunity. But I think a lot of that work is building this piece of saying what those components are, and then it's that matter of articulating what will that experience look like, feel like, sound like for kids. So thank you for the many thoughtful ideas that input into that.
We're ahead, we have a blueprint
It is.
and a game plan that we can articulate and share with the board. So thank you for your work on it. Thanks everybody. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about it throughout the year.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you. Spring budget to actual.
Do you want it up? Do you have it in front of you?
Didn't I already report out?
Jake covered part of it and send his finance subcommittee report, but
Do you want Q&A then?
sure. I know that Lindsay had a question about it.
I did.
Unless you feel like there are key points that you.
Actually, why don't you give me like a minute?
Yeah, I think you could probably answer my questions in your little, not little, I'm not trying to be little. It is in your spiel. I'm sorry.
No, so at this point, as Jake mentioned, and then Pam mentioned as well, right now, I'm projecting roughly $500,000 unspent. This is as of the end of May. Right now, there are 5 areas that seem to be in deficit. There are funds to cover that because there are other areas that have unspent funds, and so they will net out to basically the 500 or 300 or whatever it is in the next few weeks. Hopefully we have no large surprises. I don't think we have much emergencies, knock on wood, but no large financial surprises in the next couple of weeks. But in terms of the deficit areas, we have substitute teachers deficit of approximately $12,000. That is due to long-term vacancies. We had a number of them. We already have learned of a number of them coming up in September, which is a little fearful and concerning, but we will deal with them. If we budgeted for every single cost we think we might encounter, then no one would be able to afford education. And our towns definitely would not be able to afford education. So that's kind of the gamble. The second category, special education contracted services. This year, we contracted specifically for speech and language services. We actually had an increase in our budget staffing for next year. So the contracted services for speech is now coming in-house for next year. So we're hoping that stabilizes a little bit. Our services for these students have just been astronomical. We started at 200,000, we went up to 250, we went up to 300,000, we're now like at 350. Is just the trajectory is just unbelievable, but it's the way we're keeping students in district. It's definitely a cost-effective thing, but the cost of services is just right now. So we did right size it for next year's budget, as well as bring this particular position. So do you think we'll be okay for next year? Security, this primarily is the school resource officer salary. I don't actually know that figure until after the last day of school. So we're going to work with Manchester and see if we can get a better idea of what the cost might be before I get to the last week of my fiscal year. But I am holding roughly 65,000 for that salary, but it could be 70. So I'm projecting 70 if 65 fails, so that's rare. The deficit's coming from building maintenance and custodial. Primarily, this was due to the snow costs, snow removal costs. We went way over budget this past year. We think like the winter. Hopefully, we won't have another one like that anytime real soon. But we are dealing with a lot of facilities things, but they're all pretty much within line with our budgets. And then special education out of district. In the grand scheme of things, 142,000 is actually relatively small. We did have a couple tuition settlement agreements. One of them I know we brought to the committee for approval a few months ago. And then we did have another one that was less of an issue. I mean, we also had a few changes in placements throughout the year. So, not unexpected, but like I said, if we budget for every single what if, our budget would be absolutely astronomical because we do have certain things that fall into our favor and certain things that don't. But overall, we will be able to cover all these shortfalls. Next year's budget, I think, is in line with what we're seeing right now. We will do more analysis, hopefully near the end of August, be able to report on where we actually ended the year. So we'll do that. Just mention that the one-page summary of the operating budget. And the second page is our current revolving funds. At the end of the year, I also add on our grants. So you can see where we are with those. If there are any other questions there, let me know, because we do have a couple other things too. I have a few things listening.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Susie?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions on that? Right.
P card authorization. This is exciting. I'm all excited about this. So a P card is a procurement card or a purchasing card. It basically is a credit card. It's a credit card that we have control over. I've actually used them in each of my school districts except for here. And because we're still in the dark ages and a few things. So we have one single credit card at the district. If you ask the state 10, 15 years ago, they said absolutely no one have a credit card. It's the worst thing in the world. However, there are purchases we cannot make without a credit card. Online purchases, we can't get certain things. Certain vendors don't accept purchase orders. So people are either personally buying it, submitting for reimbursement. I hate personal reimbursements because you need to prove the ownership of an item, sales tax issues, all kinds of issues. So they have this program that a lot of schools are using, a lot of towns are now using it as well. Basically, the click of a button, the administrators can handle the account. They can change the limit on the cards. They can limit the vendor types that can be used on the cards. For example, you can prohibit any travel expenditures. You know, prohibit any dining expenditures. If you want to give someone just a $200 line of credit for a day, you can get that. So it's really instant. It's really controlled. And I would love to go forward with this. And part of the reason I want to go forward with this, besides the fact that it's always been on my mind, we also have student activity checking accounts at each of our schools that you guys may have heard about. Over the past few years, many schools have done away with the principal checking accounts and they run the expenditure checking accounts through the business office. So I'm proposing we do that. But however, I need to give each school the ability to make some purchases in one house. So this P card program, if authorized, will give me the ability to assign a card to each school. So we know which school's using it. The principal can maintain who's actually using the card or who signed out the card. We can eliminate the checking accounts. So basically we're killing two birds with one stone. And taking control of those checking accounts and bringing under the business office operations.
Is there a backup if the principals are on there and they delegate to someone else?
That would probably be me. So, yes, I work with principals very closely. But yeah, either me, their admin assistant, or myself. So I think by authorizing this program, we're going to see what goes. Like I said, I've actually used this specific program to other school systems previously, and it worked really well. And you do get a small match back at the end of the year, depending on how much you spend. So instead of costing us $3 a month, which our current credit card does, we actually might get a couple $100. Won't be huge, but it'll be great.
Are there any pitfalls?
They really
Sounds very
have-
functional.
Yeah, we have a number of cards, but I will have control over them. Pam will have control over them, and we don't want anyone to have control over them. We just shut them all off. Right? It's instant. It's wonderful. So yes. So therefore, we need you guys to vote on a resolution in order to approve it, and they would need to sign this resolution to go in along with our application.
So do I need to read all of this?
They'll have it. Enter the motion. You can move the motion as written.
The range to be entered into the. So I will make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing issuance of individual procurement cards as written. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Wonderful, thank you.
All the procurement cards.
I'm very excited. See, I'm very excited too.
Well, the student activities account reorganization is
Awesome.
Very exciting.
Is Bank of Montreal, this bank we have a relationship with us.
It is a bank that
I thought that was a big girl.
it's very obscure, but that's actually who our current credit card is through, believe it or not. It's a very big bank, but this is a program that ASBO, which is the Association of School Business Officials state, countrywide, has an association. So, yes, but that is the bank our current credit card is with through, and they're fabulous for our customer service. It does seem pretty odd.
All right, and we need to revisit the Essex Elementary School feasibility study budget amendment, which we've already passed once. Were there not enough people, or was it something about?
We communicated, we submitted the language to the MSBA, and there was nothing wrong with our vote. What they preferred us not to do is specify grant funds as the source of funding, because their position is that once the grant funds are given to us in reimbursement, they are now district funds.
Right.
So they just
want to know that we will be paying. They don't care where.
Exactly. They want us to quote available for.
Right.
So.
All right, so. Do I have a motion to approve the revised motion to amend the April 2nd, 2024 appropriation and the subsequent May 19th, 2026 appropriation for the Essex Elementary School feasibility study as read.
Yes, that's a very recommended.
No, I'm asking.
Yeah,
So moved. Thank you. Could I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on that? This is the second time. Voting. Everything. Okay, all in favor? That's just one. So, great, moving right along.
And they have approved that, which so we will not be.
I think we can.
I'll miss it.
I think we can payable transportation contract. We can give you a brief update, but we haven't made much progress since our last meeting.
Been enough days, believe it or not. Yeah, we're just vetting the responses. We have 3 responses, 3 great responses, so we will be executing a contract hopefully within the next.
Great responses.
Hopefully within the next week. So that's. We need to set transportation for you. So we get.
School committee comment.
We don't meet now till August. Is that right?
August
17th, which is a Monday, so then we're on the calendar for 9 to 12. If we can sneak out an additional hour, we might need it. Because I think we're gonna have some business items that we're gonna need to do and talk about, or even 30 minutes, if you could go 12 to 12:30. And maybe do a short business agenda, that would be.
Bring up go to one.
You can order something you want to
We'll say, no, we gotta go to one if we want to go.
We can. But I will be sending.
I think.
I will be sending the remote vouchers out for approval pretty much every 2 weeks, so. That's how it will be, the bills brings. It works really well.
Is there any more school committee comment? Jake, I don't want you to feel like I'm targeting you for
I'm used to it.
doing things. I just want to like make sure that you don't feel like I'm discounting what you are saying.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Maybe a more helpful way for me to frame it. I'll think about it.
I appreciate it.
I'll reflect on it.
I can just say, I do appreciate that we can have this like discussion and have different viewpoints, and I felt comfortable to be a part of it. So
That's great.
I think it was an important.
yeah, I did too.
Absolutely. Your points were very important to raise, and I think your response was totally appropriate.
Yeah.
And also, I'm reflecting on both of them.
I am too.
So thank you.
And we're still excited about it, and we know we're getting
I hope you're still excited.
I haven't killed those.
But it's helpful to know where we can make some clarifications or increase the articulation to make sure all of these.
It's a big project.
It's exciting, really exciting. One project.
All right, motion to adjourn.
Oh, 1 second.
Motion, discussion. All in favor?
Since
It's a wrap.
August 17th from 9. You can never caught one of the reasons. I'll send you.